For 1,000 cycles, the Galactic Concordance had humanity filed away under a very specific label: chaotic minor. Think of them as the galactic equivalent of a beautiful but incredibly unpredictable house cat. On one hand, they could compose symphonies that stirred the soul and create breathtaking art. But in the very next moment, they'd get into petty fights over the most ridiculous things. They were fiercely emotional, dangerously unpredictable, and could swing from moments of pure genius to acts of absolute foolishness. In the calm, quiet halls of the Concordance, they were considered completely and utterly harmless. But that perception, an idea as old and solid as the Concordance itself, was about to be shattered. And the whole thing started, as these universe-shaking events often do, with a simple distress call from a forgotten corner of the galaxy. It came from the Viridian colony, a remote human mining outpost, tucked away in the dust clouds of the Crimson Veil Nebula. The Xylos Empire, a race of arrogant bullies who treated the galaxy like their personal junkyard, had decided that the resource-rich system was now theirs. The Concordance watched, expecting a complete tragedy. They got their condolences ready and started drafting relief plans. What they didn't expect, not in their wildest dreams, was to get a lesson. The Exilos' attack was a textbook operation. Their fleet, a collection of ugly but effective warships, warped into the Viridian system and set up a perfect orbital blockade. They broadcast their demands for unconditional surrender, pointing out their massive technological and numerical advantage. It was clean, professional. It even followed all the official galactic rules for a civilized conquest. On the observation deck of the Concordance flagship, the Harmonious Gaze, the senior observers logged the event with a kind of detached pity. "It's a shame," said Observer T-Law, its crystalline form shimmering. "The humans are stubborn, but their tech is primitive. This will be over quickly." The other observers agreed, their minds already jumping ahead to the refugee crisis that was sure to follow. And at first, the humans seemed to be proving them right. The colony just went silent. No grand defiant speeches, no rescue fleet warping in to save the day. Just nothing. On the bridge of the Exilos command ship, the Imperial Praetor even allowed himself a smug little smile. He'd seen this 100 times. It was the silence of a lesser species, realizing it stood no chance. The Concordance observers nodded to each other. This was going exactly how their models predicted. The chaotic minor species was folding under pressure. It was all so predictable. It broke with a sound that was utterly alien to the Concordance's senses. It was the groaning, world-shaking hum of a sleeping giant waking up. It was the sound of industry. You have to remember, the Viridian colony was a mining outpost. The observers watched, confused, as massive energy signatures flared up, not from the colony itself, but from deep inside the asteroid belt it was built to mine. The Exilos fleet, picking up the energy surge, aimed their weapons, thinking it was some kind of last-ditch energy cannon. They couldn't have been more wrong. The humans weren't deploying warships, they were repurposing their tools. Imagine a slingshot, but instead of a rubber band, it uses pure electromagnetic force, and instead of a pebble, it's designed to hurl city-sized chunks of ore across a solar system. These were mass drivers, and the humans were turning them into the galaxy's deadliest sniper rifles. And then, the first shot was fired. It wasn't a laser, it wasn't a torpedo. It was a 10-kilometer-wide chunk of nickel iron, a flying mountain launched with enough kinetic force to tear a hole in space-time itself. It wasn't a precision strike, it was like trying to stop a bullet with a planet. The asteroid didn't just hit the Exios command ship, it swallowed it whole, wiping it and its escorts from existence in a silent, terrifying flash. The Concordance observers were just speechless. This wasn't warfare as they knew it. It was like watching a surgeon use a sledgehammer. There was no honor, no protocol, just brutally, horrifyingly practical pest control. Then another asteroid followed, and another. The Xylos fleet's perfect formation broke into a panicked scramble as they tried to dodge weapons that weren't weapons at all, just repurposed chunks of a planet. The Xylos praetor, his arrogance shattered, screamed for retaliation. His ships ignored the incoming asteroids and focused everything they had on a main colony dome. He was going to teach these primitives a lesson in real warfare. The human response to this was, somehow, even more disturbing. As the Xylos ships focused their fire, small, fast vessels erupted from the swirling clouds of a nearby gas giant, like piranhas swarming a wounded animal. Concordant scans couldn't believe it. These weren't warships. They were prospector ships, courier vessels, and tugboats, galactic equivalent of pickup trucks and fishing trawlers, now refitted into vicious hunter-killer packs. They didn't try to fight fair. They performed lightning-fast strikes, appearing from cover just long enough to destroy a ship's engines, obliterate its bridge, or vent its life support into space, before disappearing again. Then, the humans turned the entire system into a torture chamber. They broadcast on an open channel for everyone to hear. Not threats or demands. It was a live feed of the chaos they were creating, the internal comms from the Exilo ships they had just crippled. It was a symphony of terror, composed of panicked screams, choked-off pleas, and the deafening silence that followed. It was psychological warfare so pure it was like a poison injected directly into the enemy's mind. On the bridge of the harmonious gaze, the observers could only watch in horror. This was a level of calculated cruelty they had never, ever seen before. If you're as fascinated by this look into humanity's darker side as the Concordance was, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. It's the best way to help the channel keep exploring stories just like this, where humanity shows it's far more than anyone gives it credit for. Alright, now back to the lesson. The Exilos praetor, with his fleet in tatters and his crews about to mutiny, finally did the sensible thing. He broadcast a formal request to talk, citing the galactic conventions of honorable conflict. He demanded the humans stop their barbaric tactics and face him in a civilized battle. The human response was displayed on the main screen of the Concordant's observation deck. A calm female voice, with no hint of anger or panic, began to speak. She talked about human history, telling stories of conflict that made the Concordance's archives look like a children's book. She started talking about concepts the universal translator could barely handle. Total war, scorched earth, asymmetric warfare. And then, she brought up something called the Geneva Convention. For a split second, the observers felt a wave of relief, like finding a rulebook in the middle of a knife fight. Okay, the humans did have rules. But that relief curdled into dread as the woman's voice went ice cold. It wasn't a document to keep war honorable, she explained. It was a leash, a chain they had built for themselves because they knew, better than anyone, their own boundless creativity when it came to causing pain. It's a list of things we agreed not to do to each other, the voice explained, each word landing like a hammer blow. Because we know the monster within, a monster you have just unleashed. A pause hung in the silence, thick with menace. You are not part of our agreements. Those rules, that leash, they do not apply to you. The broadcast ended, and the systematic destruction of the Exilos fleet resumed. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a dissection, performed with the cold, detached precision of a surgeon removing a cancer. The remaining Exilo ships weren't just destroyed. They were systematically dismantled. Their weapons were disabled, then their engines, then their life support, leaving them as hollowed-out tombs drifting in the void. In less than 12 hours, the Exilos' empire's presence in the sector was gone. Not just defeated, erased. Their outposts were scoured clean and their ships were turned into silent, drifting chunks of metal. An emergency session of the Galactic Concordance was called. The chief observer, a being of pure energy who had calmly watched stars be born and die, was the first to speak. His voice, usually a series of calming harmonic chimes, were suddenly sharp and discordant, like a beautiful song screeching horribly out of tune. It was the sound of fear. "We were wrong," he said, the words echoing in the chamber, profoundly and dangerously wrong. "We classified them as chaotic minor. We saw them as emotional children playing with fire." He paused, his energy form flickering. "We failed to realize they were born in that fire. They are forged by it." The debate didn't last long. The conclusion was obvious. The old designation was wiped from the Concordance archives with the highest security clearance they had. The council members struggled to find a new term. Warrior race felt too noble for the brutal pragmatism they had just seen. Destroyers was too simple. It didn't capture their terrifying efficiency. Finally, an old archivist, one who had spent her life studying the histories of extinct, aggressive species, offered a suggestion. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried through the entire room. "He is not conquerors driven. They are survivors. They don't fight to win." She paused. "They fight, so they never have to fight the same enemy twice." A new file was created. A new classification was entered: humanity. Threat level, apex. The recommendation was stark and absolute. Do not engage. For the Concordance, it was like they had spent centuries studying what they thought was a harmless beehive, only to realize it was the den of a hibernating dragon. The galaxy hadn't just met a new species. It had met a new apex predator, one that had been hiding in plain sight, disguised as a chaotic, harmless child. And the galaxy was suddenly a much larger and infinitely more frightening place. Oh, what do you think? I have long gallant concerns that we can live. Is this capacity for brutal, absolute warfare a strength to be celebrated, or a terrifying flaw in the human character? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.